Hi there. I wanted to talk a little bit today about a specific piece of music, and I wanted to look at the Bach's Invention number 8 in F major. Bach's inventions are quite a good introduction for those who are perhaps around grade 6 standard with the ABRSM or other major exam boards. The inventions are a good introduction to Bach because although they are contrapuntal, they generally only have two parts, which is obviously a little bit easier technically than the fugues in the Bach 48 preludes and fugues, where we have 3 or 4 parts. And with the inventions, we normally have one part in each hand. Sometimes the parts do swap slightly between the hands. Because of that, it's a good idea from a technical point of view to learn the hands separately first, obviously working out the fingering and taking it at quite a steady speed, and only pick the tempo up when you feel comfortable. However, what I really wanted to look at today a bit more was some ideas with the interpretation. First of all, we need to think about the instrument that Bach would have used, which would have been very different to a modern day piano. Bach would have played these inventions on probably a harpsichord, maybe a clavichord. I guess he could even have played it on a pipe organ, just on the manuals. But at this point, the modern piano hadn't been invented, so he was restricted to those instruments. We do know that Bach preferred to play on a clavichord because on a clavichord you are able to achieve some dynamics, some loud and softs from the touch that you use on the keys. The problem with a clavichord is it's quite a soft tone and not able to be used as a concert instrument because it was not able to project and fill a big venue. A harpsichord was more suitable as a concert instrument, but the dynamics were unable to be changed through the touch of the hands. On a harpsichord, you do have stops, similar to an organ, which will add perhaps the octave above, octave below, and you also have the option on some of them of changing manuals, keyboards, so having 2 keyboards to produce different effects. But obviously Bach was quite restricted in terms of what he could do with the dynamics. Also with Bach's music, there's very little clues on the page as to how the piece should be interpreted. When you get a Bach, if you're reading from an text, which I would always recommend, you normally only have the notes, and that's it. There are no dynamic markings, no tempo indications, just the notation. So obviously it's very much down to us then to work out how we should interpret the piece. And there are various options. Firstly, we could try to imitate exactly how it might have sounded on a harpsichord. Obviously, to do that, ideally we would play it on a harpsichord, but we could do that on a piano. So we would play with a totally flat dynamic tone all the way through, and we might include some interest through using different articulation. On a harpsichord, often it's quite a staccato type of sound anyway, with a strong initial attack on each note. So we may choose to play the piece slightly staccato, but with a flat tone. And so on. But then I guess we have to ask, would Bach play it like that on a modern piano? So maybe we should start to incorporate some dynamics and play it much more in the style of how we can play on a modern piano. So perhaps it could become very expressive. And so on, so using quite a big dynamic range. But then perhaps that is beginning to move away from the whole style of Bach, and perhaps we're beginning to sound a little bit more like it should be written by a more modern composer. So in the end, how you interpret it is really down to your own personal feelings, and I think there has to be a balance between being authentic to what Bach, the composer, intended, but at the same time using some of perhaps your own ideas and putting in some of your own personality to the music, I guess. So my view would be that we certainly use different articulations. I think a good rule with a lot of Bach's music is to look at the smallest note value. So in the case of this particular invention, it's semiquavers, and to play those fairly legato. And then the next biggest note value, which is the quavers, we can then make slightly detached, particularly when they follow arpeggio patterns. So for example, at the beginning, so So those first quavers we can make slightly staccato, and I quite like that. However, when you've got a quaver section where you're using next door notes, now there aren't actually any examples of that in this particular Bach invention, but there are in others. It makes much more sense there to play it more legato and work out phrasing, perhaps in groups of 4. So, my interpretation might include some slightly detached quavers. The second thing I will then look at is where there are perhaps sequences. So, for example, we've got this pattern. We've got the same pattern, but it's been moved down in pitch. And so there, I think it would make sense to slightly change the dynamic. And there are other passages where it goes up in pitch, and we might, increase the dynamic in those sections. So I think there is room for including some dynamics. However, having said that, I think the dynamic range should be kept smaller than the dynamic range we would use for later composers, say Beethoven, or even more with a romantic composer like Chopin or Rachmaninoff. So, my own personal way of interpreting Bach is to keep a nice steady tempo all the way through, decide on a tempo which is appropriate to the music, where all the parts can be heard clearly, but in some cases, for example, with this invention, it has a livelier feel perhaps. Include some dynamics, but within a smaller dynamic range than you would use for perhaps other composers, and seek to bring out some interest in the articulation. I guess one thing I should mention, although it may not apply much to this invention, is there is perhaps the opportunity in Baroque music of using ornaments to decorate the music. In this piece, I guess you might include something at the end. Something like that, a bit of a decoration on the end. But because of the tempo that I would choose to play this at, I wouldn't put in too many ornaments. However, that option is there, particularly on a slower piece. You might wish to put in some ornaments. There may already be some suggestions on the page from the composer. So that's a few ideas on the Bach invention number 8. If you're around grade 5 or perhaps 6 piano, do have a go at it, because it's a fun piece to play. It's quite a good one for technique, because it does have quite a lot of passages that really work the fingers. And yeah, enjoy playing it, and it's a good introduction to some of Bach's works. So there you go, there's one interpretation. Obviously, you might have your own ideas. One final point, obviously, because Bach's music is very contrapuntal, whatever you do, always bring out the contrapuntal texture. So if you're playing a fugue, it doesn't apply so much to the inventions. If you're playing a fugue, always bring out the fugal entries and bring out the contrapuntal texture. Anyway, do leave some comments, give me some of your own thoughts, or perhaps pieces you might like me to have a little look at and put onto YouTube. And feel free to sign up for my Facebook page, facebook.com/JonathanDelbridgePiano, or obviously sign up to this YouTube channel so you can keep in touch with some new videos coming out. Thank you very much.